is the way of the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sunnah of the Sahaba Kiram. But during the Khilafah of Umar, one thing important to understand and note is that there were many battles, many battles. You had more than 50 battles just, on the Persian front, and actually 50 battles within a couple of years just on the Persian front. So you have, like hundreds, literally hundreds of battles. You have Yarmouk, and all these other great battles that took place. And then, as we mentioned last week, also during the Khilafah of Umar, we have the plague that affected the Byzantine Empire or Sham, in which many companions passed. So you have many companions that are being martyred in these battles. You also have many companions who were martyred in the plague. And so by the end of his Khilafah, you have a situation where, or at least, you start into a situation where most of the companions who were with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the beginning have either passed, been martyred, or have gotten old. And so they're limited in what they can do. When Umar is martyred, so if you remember, and it's something that we've talked about way in the past. So when Umar is martyred, too many gadgets. So, it's interesting the way that he's martyred is that he's martyred by a Persian fire worshipper who was the slave of Mughira bin Shu'bah. And he had complained to Umar that his master did not give him proper wages for the work that he did. And then, so Umar reminded him of the rights of the master. But then he went to Walid bin Mughira and told him to take care of the servant, and he reminded him of the rights of the servant. Firoz Abu Lulu, who was the Persian slave who had been captured in one of these battles, he assumed that Umar just ignored him. So this is why he wanted to he was so upset with that he was going to kill him. There's a lesson though here, like we say down here in the South, like somebody's telling somebody something that they already that they're already practicing, rather, it's like singing to the choir. Umar didn't tell the slave the rights of the slave, nor did he tell the master the rights of the master, because they're already assuming their rights. He told him the rights that he should be fulfilling for the other, and vice versa. And this is why this is relevant today, is because generally these days, like when people get married, the people give gifts to the husband of the rights of the husband, and give a gift to the wife of the rights of the wife, when it should be the other way around. Because I should be more concerned about whose rights I need to be fulfilling, rather than my rights should be fulfilled. There is no curtain between the dua of the one who is oppressed and Allah. So it's better to be oppressed than to be the oppressor. It'd be nice to be neither, but in this dunya, that generally doesn't happen. So you're better off being oppressed than oppressing someone else. So anyway, so Abu Lulu attacks Umar, with a dagger, in Fajr Salat. He killed, and while the people are trying to stop him or capture him as he's leaving, he kills some others, and then he himself is killed. But he had stabbed Umar radiallahu anhu by this point, and in the stomach as well, and so they, of course, Umar radiallahu anhu fell. Someone else took care of the salat. Salat is taken care of. Then they attend to Umar radiallahu anhu. They gave him some water to drink, and when he drank the water, it came out from the hole in his stomach. So they knew at that point, yeah, he's not going to make it. Just a few things. These are aside points. We're going to come back to Ahlul Bayt in a little while. But these are important to know historically. It kind of gives you a better overall picture. So now, one is Umar, he asked, who attacked me? And he was told, Firoz, Abu Lulu. So he thanked Allah that he was not killed by a Muslim, because he knew what was coming. But eventually, then he says that he basically nominated 6 people to replace him. He said, choose amongst these 6. All 6 of them are from Ashar al-Bashara, the 10 that were given the glad tidings. So in those 6 were Uthman radiallahu anhu, Talha bin Ubaidullah, Zubair bin Awam, Abdul Rahman bin Auf, Sa'd bin Abi Waqas, and Ali radiallahu anhum ajma'in. So these were the 6 that he said, pick amongst them, and for your leader. As we talked about, when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu passed or was passing, he nominated Umar. He didn't say make Umar your leader. He nominated him, but the shura is the one who decided. This isn't like a kingship or an inheritance. That's not the way the Khilafah works. And so Umar radiallahu anhu nominated these. Those amongst the shura had accepted this nomination. And so there were kind of discussions amongst the 6. And basically 2 people sided with Uthman, 2 people sided with Ali radiallahu anhuma, and then eventually Ali radiallahu anhu said, kind of backed down and said for Uthman radiallahu anhu to be the Khalifa. At this point, Uthman radiallahu anhu is around 72 lunar years. Solar years, you say like he's around 71. But he was around 72. So he's an older man, and a very soft-hearted man. And there's a saying that people take kindness for weakness. They see somebody who's kind and soft, and they want to take advantage of that. And this is nothing new, and it's been going on from the beginning, and it's going to continue to happen. So we have to keep all of this in mind when we look at the events that happen later on. Uthman radiallahu anhu will be the Khalifa for 12 years. And his Khilafah, you can divide it up into 2 portions. You have the first 6 years, and then you have the latter 6 years. The first 6 years were very smooth. You still have the same people in administration as you had, or most of the same people in the administration as you had during the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu anhu. But as I mentioned earlier, by the end of the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu anhu, you have a situation where a lot of these companions are either passing away, getting older, or being martyred. And so you can imagine by the middle of the Khilafah of Uthman, this is kind of exacerbated even more, because during the Khilafah of Uthman, you have more expansion of the Muslim empire. More battles, more martyrs. Okay. So basically, during the first 6 years of his Khilafah, Ali radiallahu anhu is still the Chief Justice. The honor of Ahlul Bayt, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, Islam is still intact as far as amongst the people. So all of this is going on. There were certain, now at the end of this first 6 years, now you start having issues. Because what you have, and this is an important point to note as well, and this is, you see this throughout cultures. When someone works hard at something, they appreciate it, they understand it, they don't take it for granted. When you have the next generation that comes in and just kind of walks into this, they have no regards, no appreciation, for what they are given. Because they didn't have to sacrifice anything for it. You can see this like people that immigrated here from overseas. That first generation worked really hard, right? That next generation, they took everything for granted because it's handed to them. And this applies in everything. Easy come, easy go. If you don't have to work for it, well, it's kind of funny. You look at like this stimulus money that they handed out. This was to keep the economy going. What did the people do with it? You go buy lotto tickets, spend it on stuff that basically has no meaning. Nothing you have to work for. You just boom, easy come, easy go. So when you have a generation that is reaping the fruits of the toils of those that came before them, they don't understand all of the hard work that the people before them, all of the suffering, all of the sacrifices that they made. So this is the situation that we're seeing at this point in the Islamic history. You have this new generation that has come up who didn't sacrifice anything for Islam. All they're seeing is all these spoils of war that come in. And, so their understanding of the religion itself is, you can't compare their understanding to the understanding of those companions who gave up everything for Islam. Even amongst the companions. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifies this in the Quran itself. When he says, "Sabiqun al-awwalun," those who were the first. He says, they're the ones who excelled. Then he talks about those who came later, and that they're not equal. And most scholars say that this basically is, for those who accepted Islam before Fatih Makkah, and those who accepted Islam after Fatih Makkah, so after the conquest of Makkah. And you'll see this, historically, you're going to see this distinct difference in attitudes, in practices, in mindset, and in understanding, and everything. And this isn't, and even Rasulullah specified this. A lot of people, and we spoke about this before, they will quote the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he said that you, even if you spend the whole mountain of Uhud, equal in gold to the whole mountain of Uhud, that what you spend is not even equal to 1 mud, which is 600 grams, so it's a little more than a pound and a quarter of barley that my companions have spent. But what people forget to tell you is that he wasn't talking to us. We're not even that much. We could spend Everest and everything else, and we could spend the whole world, and we're not equal to that, to what they did, to even, a moment of what they did. But he was talking to Khalid bin Walid, radiallahu anhu. Khalid bin Walid, if you read the hadith, Khalid bin Walid had a disagreement with Abdul Rahman bin Auf. Abdul Rahman bin Auf is Ashar al-Bashara. He's one of the early companions. Khalid bin Walid accepted Islam seventh year of Hijri, so he accepted Islam a year before Fatih Makkah. They had a dispute, and Khalid bin Walid said some choice words to Abdul Rahman. And Rasulullah rebuked him, saying that don't curse my companions, because even if you spend the whole mountain of Uhud, the gold equal, or the whole mountain of Uhud of gold, you can't equal what he did. Even a pound and a quarter of barley that he spent. So even amongst the companions, there's a whole range of understandings. And we see this, when we see this especially during the Khilafah of Umar, because you start seeing these shifts. And whenever Umar needed to make a decision, simple example of this is that he's traveling to Sham. Plague has broken out. They stop on the way and to decide whether they go forward or they come back, or they go back to Medina. And so what he did was, he took a general opinion from everybody. And basically when he did this, half the people said, let's go forward, and half the people said, no, let's go back. I mean, it was kind of a split. So then he started narrowing it down. And the way he narrowed it down in the end was those who basically were amongst the first to accept Islam and spent the most time with the Rasulullah. He said, what's your opinion? All of them said, we need to go back. And then eventually one of the other companions came, and I forget whether it was Abdul Rahman bin Auf or Abu Hurairah. I think it was Abdul Rahman bin Auf or Abu Hurairah. Is one of those two who came. They were traveling from behind. They caught up, and he's the one who narrated that Rasulullah said that if there's a plague, those who are outside should not go in, and those who are inside should not go out. And then Umar, he said, he thanked Allah, saying that, thanking Allah, saying that, for making their decision in line with the decision of Allah. So we have to keep all of this in mind when we're moving forward, talking, especially when we talk about things that happened during the Khilafah of Uthman, and then the Khilafah of Sayyidina Ali, and then Imam Hassan radiallahu anhum. So all of these three Khilafahs are very important to understand, and then those things that will come later on, even after that, when the kingship starts. So during these last 6 years of the Khilafah of Uthman, you start having issues that arise. And you have people, if you can call them that, I'm going to bounce back again so we can understand as we're moving forward. During the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, during Makkah, there's no hypocrisy. Right? There's nothing to gain by being Muslim, everything to lose. Come to Medina Munawwara, until the Battle of Badr, there's no hypocrisy. Because again, there's nothing to gain by becoming Muslim, and everything to lose. After Badr, now you start seeing the hypocrites rising. And then eventually you get Abdullah ibn Ubay and that whole movement. However, during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, every time they would try something, they'd get knocked down. So they never were able to be successful in anything. During the Khilafah of Abu Bakr, same thing. They tried to stick their head out, got knocked back down. Umar, the same thing. Because you had those people in abundance who had sacrificed everything for Islam, whose understanding was directly from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So someone coming in and trying to create issues and trying to misguide them, was not an easy task. So when these people would try something, they didn't go away. They just kind of went underground. But now, during the Khilafah of Uthman, the last 6 years, again, you have this new generation that's come up, whose understanding is nowhere near the understanding of those who came before them, who have not had to sacrifice anything for the religion, have gained all of these fruits. And so when these hypocrites start infiltrating, they have fertile soil to go in. And this is what you see. And so there were issues during the Khilafah of Uthman. One thing is, when the empire expanded, you started getting into areas where the first language definitely wasn't Arabic. The second language wasn't even Arabic. So you had people who had some understanding of the language, but that was, but you had other people who had no understanding of the language either. And then also you get into areas where the dialects have changed. The Quran was revealed in the language of Rasulullah, which was the dialect of Quraysh. Because even then, Arabic had many dialects. And the dialects of Quraysh, you had 7 major ones, and then you had 10 in certain areas. So now what you're having, though, is you have these people whose language isn't Arabic, or whose dialects are very different from that of Quraysh, trying to recite the Quran in their own dialects. So one of the things that Uthman radiallahu does is, because again, the Quran revealed in the language of Quraysh, he says, no, this isn't going to work. They weren't just reciting it in their own dialects, they were writing it in their own dialects. So this is why he orders that all of these writings that have been placed should all be brought in, and they were all collected and burnt, and then placed in running water. Okay. And then, the Mus'haf, or the compilation of the Quran that took place during the time of Abu Bakr, from that one copy, there were 6 more copies made. And then those copies were sent to each state, so to each of the governors. And all the other copies of the Quran were to be the same as these copies. And there were, actually, until not too long ago, within the past 100 years, there was still a Quran that was written by Sayyidina Ali, Karamallah wajh, which burnt in a fire, I guess in one of the libraries. So that's within the past century. And then they found a copy of parts of the Quran in one of the British archives. Because you have to understand, when the British went in to any country, they of course, robbed them of everything, plundered and took whatever, and they didn't have time to look through everything. So what they would do is they would go in, steal everything, take it back to the homeland, and just archive it, put it up, and we'll look at it later. And so just recently they discovered, because they're pulling stuff out, they found a copy of the Quran, parts of the Quran, that when they carbon dated it, basically goes back to the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Surah Najm, parts of Surah Najm are in there, and there are other parts as well. So it was funny because this non-Muslim group, or rather anti-Muslim group, was showing the video of that. Not it being recited, but just showed the video, everything's silent, you have this writing, and they're talking about, these writings were there before Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But if you look at the carbon dating, it's actually right around that time. So and that's one of the things, like, you can put up anything these days, put a caption underneath it, it's from, 20 years ago, and everybody starts, see what's happening. But that's sort of like what's going on in Saudi Arabia right now. We were talking about this earlier. They're decorating the whole country. In Mecca, the streets, they've decorated the streets with banners with the name of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam on them and all around. And everybody that's visiting, thinking, oh, they're also celebrating the Mawlid, which would be nice. But they're doing that because September 23rd was their national day. So that's okay to celebrate. But the coming of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is not okay to celebrate. So anyway. But coming back to this. That was kind of a sidetrack. So now, you have, so that was one of the issues, is the Quran. And so of course, and again, points to remember. Communication was not just pick up a phone and talk to somebody. If I needed to, so someone in Kufa needed to communicate with somebody in Medina Munawwara, I had to write a letter, seal the letter, send the letter. The letter probably gets there, a month later. They had to open the letter, look at the letter, write a letter back. Okay. And so that's 2.5 months right there. One communication. Yeah. Month going back, and then you probably thought about it for a few days before you answered the letter. I mean, just the way we normally work. Okay. So, and then, but the other thing is you have to trust the person you gave the letter to be taking the letter without making any changes in the letter. And that's another point that people forget. Because plenty of that went on. And especially when you have this infiltration of hypocrites coming up, and so you get a lot of propaganda, a lot of miscommunication, and so this is where we start seeing issues between the companions. Over this issue of burning the Quran, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, who was in Kufa, who was the governor of Kufa at that time, he was appointed by Umar and will eventually be removed by Uthman. It created an issue because the copies that he had, the writings that he had, were all correct. But Uthman, he made this general order because otherwise you got to go through each copy. So it was easier just to say bring everything in, and then we'll restart fresh. Sort of like buying an old house and then trying to renovate it versus starting from scratch and building. It's a lot easier just to start from scratch, and that's what he said. He would start from there. Later on, people during the Khilafah with Ali, and some people were talking and criticizing Uthman over this one point. There are other points, and we'll mention some of those as well. Over this one point, and Ali rebuked them, saying that if I had been there, I would have done the same thing. So he basically, accepted the decision of Uthman, saying that this was the right decision and the way he went about doing it. However, this created issues between various people. But the other issue that starts to happen is now a lot of these, you have people, as we mentioned, Uthman, when he becomes the Khalifa, is around 72. By the time that issues start to arise, he's 6 years older, so he's about 78. So he's almost 80 years old. Very soft-hearted. And what happens is you have a lot of people from Banu Umayyah, from his family, now coming in. Cousins, half-brothers, distant relatives, all these other issues, all these other people. And especially when somebody is in a position of authority, everybody becomes your relative. It's like when somebody wealthy dies, everybody shows up. So, because, they expect to get something. And this is what we see. But also, as I said, a lot of the older companions have either passed on, or they become old and they're having a hard time doing things. So Uthman radiallahu starts, appointing relatives to certain positions, administrative positions. These are people who are qualified, but with some of them, you wonder about certain aspects of what they're doing. So one example of that is that Walid bin Uqba is made the governor of Kufa, and one morning he comes to lead the Fajr Salat, and instead of leading 2 rakat, he made it 4 rakat. And after the Salat, when the people, because of course he stands up there, he's saying Subhanallah, he's continuing his Salat. And so when the people went up and started, questioning what he did, there was that stench of alcohol. And this is mentioned in Hadith and Sahih Muslim. Of course, letters written to Uthman, of course, again, you're talking a month. And then finally, he does take action against him. But in the meantime, while you're waiting for the letter to get there and for him to take action against him, you got all the propaganda going on that, this is his relative, so he's not doing anything, and all of this other nonsense. And of course, bad things are very quick to spread. Good things take time. And so you can, so these groups that are trying to undermine Islam, who've been trying to undermine Islam from the beginning, again, now they've got all of this fertile soil to be working with. Another issue that came up was that his relatives that he appointed, he would pay them more than the other administrators. So that became an issue. But what people didn't pay attention to was that he paid them out of his own pocket. He wasn't paying them from Baytul Mal. He's paying them from his own pocket. If I give some money to my relative, that's none of anybody else's business. But again, this was something that the hypocrites were able to use as propaganda against him. And so they brought up all of these issues that kept kind of growing and growing. To the extent that the propaganda was so strong that you had caught up within the propaganda companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some of the older companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because again, it took time for message, and like even when Uthman took action against, this half brother of his who had done this thing that we mentioned, not everybody knows about the action that he took against him. So in their minds, it's still, he didn't do anything, because that's what they heard from the beginning. He's not doing anything. So things got bad enough to such an extent that you have, large groups that are coming into Medina in the end, and basically hold the city hostage. The other thing that was happening slowly over this time was that Ahlul Bayt is getting marginalized. Because you have Banu Umayyah now controlling many key positions. Historically, Banu Umayyah and Banu Hashim have always been at odds with each other, even before Islam. You look at what was going on in Makkah before Islam, there was always that competition between Banu Hashim and Banu Umayyah. And this is one of the reasons that Abu Jahl cited for not accepting a Rasulullah was that we've competed with them in everything, in feeding when he was asked, he said and the person who was asking was Urwa bin Masud, Thaqafi from Banu Thaqif from Ta'if, and they were friends before Islam, before Urwa eventually, well, Abu Jahl had died before, was killed before that, but eventually Urwa radiallahu becomes Muslim after Fatih Makkah. But he came and visited Abu Jahl during the early days of the declaration of prophethood. And he asked Abu Jahl, he said, I heard that you have a man who's declared prophet. He said, yes. He said, well, what do you think? He said, well, he speaks the truth. He said, well, have you accepted him? He said, no. He said, why not? He says, look, we have competed with Banu Umayyah Banu Hashim in everything. Feeding the pilgrims, giving water to the pilgrims, housing the pilgrims, doing all these things. And now that they have a prophet, how can we compete with them in this? So his ego kept him from accepting Islam. So the rivalry between Banu Umayyah and Banu Hashim was not something new. This continued on during the time of Rasulullah ﷺ and during the time of, of course, during the time of Rasulullah ﷺ, Banu Umayyah, with the exception of Uthman and maybe one or two others, Banu Umayyah the people of Banu Umayyah did not accept Islam until after Fatih Makkah. During the Khilafah of Abu Bakr and Umar, they kept them in check. So even the ones that they had placed in administrative positions, Abu Bakr didn't place any of them. Umar left some of them in administrative positions, but again, the way Umar ruled was that basically they themselves said it was like holding the reins of a horse all the way down to the ground. He didn't let anybody move or make decisions that he did not agree with. So he kept, and this is why Rasulullah ﷺ talks about him as that door that kept all the fitna out. But then once he's martyred, that door is broken. So now all of these fitnas start trickling in. And again, at the last days of Uthman, you basically have a flood of this coming in. And so all these people are now able to use, these hypocrites are able to use all of this against Uthman, create such a fervor amongst the people against him that you have large delegations coming into Medina Munawwara from Egypt, from Kufa, and from Basra, and basically holding the whole city hostage. They surround the house of Uthman, and the people in Medina are so scared that they don't even come out of their houses. Uthman writes or sends message to Sayyidina Ali Karamallahu wajh, asking him, what should I do? And Ali said, look, you give the order and Zulfiqar is ready. His sword, he said, my sword is ready. But Uthman, he says, I can't do this. And I'm not willing to do this because there are amongst them innocent people. And he was not willing to allow even one drop, or rather he was willing to give up his own life rather than to see, the drop of the Muslim blood being spilt, because of him. Marwan, who will become a central figure, actually, Marwan is important to note, and we've talked about him before, some in Fridays and some, in the past few classes. But Marwan bin Hakam is the cousin of Uthman, and he's also the son-in-law of Uthman. His father is Hakam, His father accepted Islam after Fatih Makkah. But then Rasulullah SAW exiled him. And there is a difference of opinion as to exactly why he was exiled. But everybody agrees that he was rebuked because he was copying the Prophet. And here copying, it doesn't give the clear explanation here. In Urdu, we would say nakal utarna. So, Rasulullah SAW was going someplace and he was behind, and he was like making a joke of the way that Rasulullah SAW was moving. Rasulullah SAW sees behind him like he sees in front of him. And we know that from the famous hadith, when he's leading the salat, and after the salat he says to the companions, who was doing like this, and who was doing this, and all the things that they were doing. They knew that him asking who didn't mean he didn't know. He's asking because he already knows. He's telling them you shouldn't be doing this. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, how did you see? He says, I see behind me like I see in front of me. He didn't see I see behind me like you see in front of you. We don't even see in front of us like he sees in front of him. Okay? So, Hakam did this. Hakam is the uncle of Uthman. He's the one who, when Uthman accepted Islam, wrapped him up in a carpet and burnt it or lit it on fire on both sides. And Abu Bakr is the one who came and saved him. But again, Hakam, after Fatih Makkah, he comes and he says, I'm Muslim. Rasulullah exiles him. When Abu Bakr became Khalifa, he actually exiled him even further. When Umar became Khalifa, he exiled him even further. And during the Khilafah of Umar, somewhere in there is when Marwan, the son, is born. And Marwan is literally a chip off the old block. So now, during the Khilafah of Uthman, Hakam dies, and Uthman brings Marwan to Medina. And at this point he's starting into a young man. And some of the companions complained to Uthman, but he said, I've been given permission to do this, or authority to do this. Here, one point also that we need to understand about Uthman, other than his soft heart, and this supersedes everything that Uthman does, is that at the time of Tabuk, because Uthman had shown just such generosity that he donated 300 camels with all of their things and 1,000 gold coins, one gold coin being equal to 15 dirham, at a time when you could buy a cow for 3 dirham, so one gold coin you could buy 5 cows. He donates 1,000 gold coins, 300 camels with all of the stuff on them, like they're not just camels, but they're camels that are laden with all the goods that you need to go into war. Food, all of this, whatever the camels could carry. Rasulullah SAW said at that time, he says that it doesn't matter what Uthman does after this, nothing of his can ruin anything. So we need to keep that in mind when we say, oh, he did this and he did that. Well, it doesn't matter what he did. Rasulullah said it doesn't matter what he does. Nothing of his can ruin anything of him. So Uthman calls Marwan. He calls him and he also makes him his son-in-law. And then, but if you look at everything that's going on in the background, because by this time, again, Uthman is in his 80s. and this is 80s then. We're not talking about 80s today. We're not talking about 80s when you've lived a cush life. We're talking about 80s when you've lived a hard life. Gone into battle, fighting, have wounds, and all of the things, that go on with living in the desert, 1,400 years ago. When the average lifespan is 50. So Marwan takes advantage of all of this. And so what happens is that the people in Egypt, and there's a whole different background to all of this, or more extensive background, which I'm not going to go over today. These are topics for later times. I'm trying to focus on those things that will allow us to understand the position of Ahlul Bayt. And this is, even though I'm not talking about them directly, but this is all background information that helps us understand their position as we talk about them more direct, when we talk about them more directly. So Marwan, the people from Egypt, one of their demands was that the governor of Egypt was the what we call the nurse brother of Uthman. He's the one who was appointed as the governor of Egypt. The people didn't like him and they wanted him removed because of various things. And if we go into his background, he is actually, and his background is important to understand too. So I'm going to go over that just quickly. He initially accepted Islam early on. He immigrated to Medina Munawwara with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdullah bin Abi Sarh. So he knew how to read and write, and so when some of the verses came down, he sat down with the scribes and he was writing. But when he wrote it incorrectly. And Rasulullah ﷺ called him out on it. When he called him out on it, he realized that, his position was jeopardized. So overnight he runs back to Mecca, declares himself non-Muslim. He buys 2 slave girls that were very good poetesses, and he has them do poetry against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam enters Mecca, his name and the name of those 2 slave girls are on the list of 10 people killed on sight, even if they're holding on to the cloak of the Kaaba. And one of those slave girls was killed holding on to the cloak of the Kaaba. He, however, was a lot shrewder. So what he does, he hides, and then he sneaks and he finds a way to Uthman, who's his nurse brother. And he knows the soft heart of Uthman. So he says, look, take me to him. I'm sorry for everything I've done. I want to repent, and I want to, So Uthman sneaks him in to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he comes before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he says, he declares his Islam. And when he does, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam turns his face. And he does it again. And again, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam turns his face. And again, the 3rd time. And now the 3rd time when he does this, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says to him, okay, fine, you can go. The order for his death is removed. So he goes. But what's important to note here is after he leaves, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam looks at the companions and rebukes them. And he says, was there no one of you who could have killed him for me? And this is in the hadith, so this isn't just books of the history. This is all in the hadith. He says, was there no one amongst you who would have killed him for me? And they said, Ya Rasulullah, we were waiting for a sign. You should have given us a sign. And he said, it is not for the prophets to give such signs. When the order was already there, I didn't need to give the sign. He didn't need to give the sign. He said, it's not for the prophets to give such signs. So he is the one who eventually becomes the governor of Egypt, and he becomes the catalyst for all of the turmoil in Egypt. Well, coming back to the other point, when Rasulullah said, is there no one amongst you who could have killed him for me? It's like when Abdullah ibn Ubay, and the verses for Abdullah ibn Ubay came in the Quran about his hypocrisy. Okay? And the companions were asking for permission to kill him, and Umar, of course, was first in line, and Rasulullah said no, because people will start saying that Muhammad is killing his own, because they don't have this concept. Same thing when Zul Khuwaisra was disrespectful to Rasulullah sallallahu. And when Umar and Khalid radiallahu anhuma, they pulled out their swords and said, give us permission. And one of the things that he said to them, before he gave the prophesied everything that was going to come from this man, he says, no, because people will say that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam kills his own. So all these people that are coming to Islam, this will give ammunition to the hypocrites, to do other things. So same thing here. But he eventually becomes the governor of Egypt, and again becomes the catalyst for all of this turmoil. So now when these people come to come to Medina Munawwara and voice their concerns, so Uthman calls, wants Ali for counsel, and he says, well, so finally they agreed that the governor should be changed. And they were going to send the governor that people of Egypt wanted was Abu Bakr, was the son of Abu Bakr, Muhammad bin Abu Bakr, radiallahu. Muhammad bin Abu Bakr, radiallahu, was born the day that Rasulullah sallallahu left for Hajj. His mother is Asma bint Umais, whose first husband was the cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu, the older brother of Ali, Ja'far at-Tayyar. And so his mother is Asma bint Umais. His father is Abu Bakr. He's born there, so by the time of Rasulullah passed, he was maybe 3 months old, but he is a Sahabi. After Abu Bakr passed, Ali married Asma bint Umais. So he's raised in the house of Ali. And so that's who Egypt wanted as their governor. So finally the agreement was made. So Uthman writes a letter telling the old governor that you need to step down, and Abu Bakr will be the governor. Okay. Well, the letter is sent, and all of these groups that were there, that had come from outside, all of them said, oh, we're satisfied. So we're leaving. So they all left. You have one group going towards Kufa, you have one group going towards Busra, and you have one group going toward Basra, and one group going toward Egypt. Different routes, different paths. The one that was going towards Egypt intercepted a person who's carrying a letter. They capture a slave riding the camel of Uthman, and they demand the letter, and they take the letter, and they open the letter, and in the letter you have certain dots that were moved, and instead of saying and instead of saying to make Muhammad bin Abu Bakr the governor, the letter says kill Muhammad bin Abu Bakr. These three groups come back all at the same time. A lot of this raises a lot of questions. And questions to be thinking about as I'm moving forward is, how come these three groups that went on three separate paths all come back at the same time? How come this group that's going toward Egypt demanded to see the letter and open the letter when the letter is supposed to be assumed to be telling the governor there to step down and Muhammad bin Abu Bakr will be your governor? The only conclusion you come to is that a lot of this was pre-planned. So when they come back, they bring this letter with them, and they show it to Uthman, and this is again when Uthman asks Ali to come and say, what's going on? And Uthman acknowledges, he says that the camel is mine, the serpent is mine, the seal on the letter is mine, but he says the letter is not mine. So Ali himself says that this is the doing of Marwan. Because Marwan was in the house. He's the only one who had motive to do this in the house. He's the only one who had access to do this in the house. All the other people that are outside are also saying, we want Marwan, give us Marwan. However, there are certain rules in Islam. So even though Ali acknowledges, I know it's Marwan, but he had no proof. And that's why he didn't pursue it any further. Because in Sharia, Sharia deals with two things: what is apparent and what you can prove. The reality of the situation may be different, but if you can't prove it, and it's not what's apparent, you can't bring that into court. It's not, in a court of Islamic law, just like if somebody commits zina, you have to have 4 witnesses, all whose stories collaborate. If you only have 3 witnesses, the other person gets off free. The people that accused him now are the ones that are punished. Even though the reality may be, he did something, but you can't prove it Islamically. So Sharia deals with what is apparent and what can be proven. And so this is why Ali didn't, when he said, I know Marwan's doing this, but he didn't say, okay, let's just, we're going to execute him anyway. This was the position of Uthman. He says, if I hand them over, they'll kill him. But again, based on what proof? Marwan, of course, is denying everything, but we know historically, he's the one who's behind everything. And we know that from things that are going to happen later on. And including things that Aisha says about Marwan. And I'm just going to go over that, and then I'll end today, because I got off on certain things, or rather certain things took me longer than I thought I would. Because I want to get into the Khilafah of Ali, because that's where a lot of these other things start becoming easier to understand. But when and this hadith is in Bukhari. So when Muawiyah nominated Yazid, Marwan at that time was the governor of Medina, and Marwan gives this khutbah, basically saying that Yazid is crown prince and he's going to be the Khalifa, and everybody needs to give allegiance to Yazid. So the brother of Aisha radiallahu anhu, the son of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Abdul Rahman, so he's the oldest son. His mother and the mother of Aisha radiallahu anhu are the same. Their fathers, of course, are the same because they're both the children of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So he stood up. And he stood up, and he says that, and he had some. So he said that this is basically denouncing what Marwan was saying. And so when he said this, Marwan ordered that he be arrested. So he immediately ran into the house of Aisha, which was right there at the masjid. Didn't have to go far. So he goes inside. Of course, no one's going to enter her house. So Marwan comes and he starts yelling from outside. And he quotes the verse of the Quran, verse 17 of Surah Ahqaf, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the disobedient son, who, the parents are calling him to do the right thing, and he says no, and he says, oh, this is stories of the old and all of this. So if you read this verse 17 of Surah Ahqaf, Surah number 46. So Marwan says, oh, this verse was revealed for Abdul Rahman bin Abu Bakr. So Aisha, when she hears this, because he's misquoting the Quran, he's mis-explaining the Quran, and he's saying things that are totally untrue. So now she, from within the house, responds to him and says that there was no verse or nothing in the Quran that was revealed about the children of Abu Bakr other than the verses of Surah Nur in my defense. When she was accused of illegitimacy, astaghfirullah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed like 18 verses in her honor and in her defense. So these are the only verses in the Quran that were revealed in honor of the progeny of Abu Bakr. But then she doesn't stop here. She goes on. This is the end in the hadith of Sahih Bukhari, but when you read in the other hadiths, like in Mustadrak and stuff, you see, she says, however, you, to Marwan, you are the one about whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Shajarata mal'una. You were that Allah's curse and the curse of the Prophet ﷺ was on you when you were still in the loins of your father. And Shajarata mal'una is the wretched tree, family tree. So you and your father are both wretched. And she says this, and which is in Surah Bani Israel, Surah number 17, verse number 60. It mentions Shajarat Maluna, this wretched family tree. He says, you are the one that this verse is revealed for. It refers to your father and his progeny. So you were accursed even before you were born. And she says, this is Aisha saying this. So this is Marwan. Again, this will be very helpful in understanding things that happened during the Khilafah of Ali as well as even after that. So I'm going to end with this part of things right here today. As I mentioned earlier, today is the 8th of Rabiul Awwal. So according to some companions and some scholars, this is the day of the birth of Rasulullah. There's a difference of opinion. Some say the 8th, some say the 9th, some say the 12th, and some say later in Rabiul Awwal. What is agreed upon is that it was Monday, and pretty much agreed upon that it was Rabiul Awwal. And the reason it's agreed upon as far as Monday is, as we mentioned in Friday, is when he was asked, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why he fasted on Monday. He said, because this is the day I was born, and the day that the first revelation came to me. So he acknowledges the day that he is born. So again, these are days that of course, for the companions, every day was a day to celebrate Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For us, it's sort of like with Laylatul Qadr, because of course a lot of people, they use that excuse that if it was important we would know the date. Well, Laylatul Qadr, tell me the date, and you can't. Some things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps hidden as a treasure. Forces us to look. Otherwise, everybody would just do ibadah on that one night of Laylatul Qadr and be done. Same thing with the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His coming has changed everything. You look, historically, spiritually, and in every aspect. So we need to acknowledge these things and understand these things. But unfortunately now, you start talking about him, and it becomes an issue. They can talk about their kings, they can talk about everything else, or you talk about him in a certain specified way, so that you limit him. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has unlimited him, then who are we to limit him? There is nothing that I can say about him. Let me put it this way. In order to exaggerate somebody, I have to know where their limit is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't put a limit on Rasulullah. Rasulullah is not Allah, he is not the creator. But amongst the creation, he is unlimited. And this actually, is kind of interesting. You get into this in Boolean algebra. Well, the first place I learned this was at Tech, in Boolean algebra. That one infinite set can be larger than another infinite set. And you can prove this. And you can prove it intuitively too. Because intuitively, it's like, a simple example of this is like, let's say I have two people or I have two rooms, and I have people in each room, but I don't know how to count more than one. How do I know which room has more people? Or how can I find out which room has more people? And again, I don't know more than one. Okay? Like some people, they don't know more than 1,000, so I don't know more than one. So how do I know? All I want to know is, I don't care how many more, I just want to know which room has more. How do I figure that out? I pair them off. I take one person from this room, and I take one person from this room. Okay? And then another person. And the room that still has people left in it has more people, right? So, if I look at a segment, that's big, that's that big, how many points are in that segment by definition? Infinite number of points. Because, a point is infinitesimally small. So you have an infinite number of points, right? But now I go from a segment this big and I have a segment this big. How many points are in this segment? Infinite number of points. Okay. But if I put them side by side and pair it off, one segment is larger than the other segment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has neither beginning nor end. Rasulullah has beginning. And there will be an end, but then he will be re-begun, like all of the rest of us. But again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created him in an unlimited fashion as an example for us, or rather for the one that we need to love, because he's the one that he loves. He created his own beloved, and then he named him Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which means what? Which means the one who is excessively praised. We say in Surah Fatiha, and all day long we say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Right? All of the hamd is for Allah, Rabbul Alameen, Lord of the worlds, the Lord of creation. And yet all of the derivatives of hamd, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to his Habib. Rasulullah is Hamid. He is the one who praises Allah. But then when he started creating everything else, he went from Hamid to Ahmad, because no one else can praise Allah like Rasulullah praises Allah. This is why in the heavens he is known as Ahmad. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created all of these angels, and he created all of the prophets, and they're all praising Allah, but their praise, is nothing in comparison to the praise of Rasulullah, the way the Rasulullah praises Allah. So that's why he's known in the heavens as Ahmad, the one who excessively praises. But then, Allah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he becomes Muhammad, the one who is praised. But then when he creates the rest of creation, he praises some of the rest of creation, but then that praise is nothing compared to the praise of Rasulullah. So he names him Muhammad, the one who is excessively praised. When Allah praises him, then who are we? Our praise doesn't mean anything. We praise him not because it changes anything, but because it helps us. Our praising him isn't beneficial to him, it's beneficial to us. So I'll end there. Any questions? Yeah, I kind of spent today giving more background, because this will be once, next time we'll get into the martyrdom of Uthman, who came to his aid in the end, and then get into the Khilafah of Ali. And once we get into the Khilafah of Ali, then that's where we will start seeing all of these different ideologies show their faces. Not that they weren't there before, but now they will become more organized. And we'll see all of these ideologies popping up. And that's why understanding the Khilafah of Ali is so important, especially in these days, because when we see all of these ideologies, we also need to know how do we deal with them. And we learn that through the Khilafah of Ali and the Khilafah of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. And so these are, his Khilafah, unfortunately, is the one that's the least talked about, because people don't know how to deal with the issues of the companions, and which is not really hard to do, but most people aren't willing to put the effort into it, and that's the catch.
I have one question, Dr.
Yes.
In what city and country Imam martyred?
What's that?
In what city or country Imam Muhammad is martyred like that, Kim?
Imam
Omar?
Omar? So the question is, where was Omar martyred? So Omar used to make a dua that, "Oh Allah, give me martyrdom and give it to me in Medina Munawwara." So all of the people around him used to say, what kind of dua is this? All the wars and everything are going on outside, so how are you going to be martyred in Medina Munawwara? And yet his dua was accepted, so he was martyred in Medina Munawwara. He was getting ready to lead the Fajr Salat when he was attacked in the Masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah. So that's why he's buried there next to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when he's martyred, and we didn't go over this, but when he's martyred, or when he's attacked and he knows that he's going to pass, other than nominating those 6, he also he sent his son to ask permission from Aisha Siddiqa that he be buried there next to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because this is her house. Then she said that, I was hoping to keep that space for myself, but since you've asked, I give this to you. Imam Hassan al-Islam was also supposed to be buried there, but Marwan is the one who created the issue, and that's something we'll go over later on as well. Isa al-Islam, when he comes back, he will be buried there. Yes.
So how many graveyards?
There are 3 there. Okay, so this is, like when you go, inshallah, you'll go to Medina Munawwara. So when you go, this is, the house of Aisha was attached to the masjid. The prophets are buried where they passed. So he passed there, and this is where he was buried, in that house. It is now encircled by the masjid. So it is within the masjid. Abu Bakr is there, next to him. So you have the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you have the grave of Abu Bakr, and then you have the grave of Umar. And then Jannatul Baqi, which is the graveyard of the Muslims in general and the graveyards of the companions. That's, when you go out that door, it's probably, 100 yards away. It's not far. It's right there as well. And that's a big graveyard.
So you said Isa is going to be buried next to him or somewhere else?
Yeah, right there. Within that house.
That's interesting.
Yes. Inshallah. Okay. Anything else?
Well, I got one more question.
Okay.
About Marwan.
Yes.
Marwan, the one who Rasulullah asked him his companion to did not kill him?
No. Marwan wasn't born then. So Marwan is born later. This was Abdullah bin Abi Sarf, who is, so this is a different guy. Similar mindsets, okay, but different person. There are people that will argue with me and you or anyone who acknowledges what I'm saying, and because there are people who go and they want to praise Marwan and they want to praise everybody else, and people that try to say that, oh no, they're companions. These are companions. The definition of companion is the one who saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with iman, and he dies on that iman. Okay. There are companions who did things that were not appropriate, but they are still companions. Okay, so this is an important point to understand. When we respect the companions of Rasulullah, we respect them because they are his companions, period. Not because of anything they did or didn't do, but because they are his companions. Just like we respect the household of Rasulullah because they are his household. Again, not because of anything they do or don't do. So this is an important concept that I'm going to come back to and kind of give more details on to understand more, to better. But just for right now, just understand that. But there are those whose what they did, took them out of Islam, and some who literally, declared their I guess their disbelief. But unfortunately these days, and even before, people like, kind of painting everybody with the same brush. So they just it's all or none, and that's not how things work. You got to look at things individually as well. And then the other thing there also is, all the companions, we think good of them, and we respect them, and we honor them because they are the companions of Rasulullah. But even as we were talking in the beginning, not all the companions are the same. So that's important to understand. So inshallah we'll end here.
Quran was compiled by Hazrat Usman radiallahu ta'ala.
No. The compilation of the Quran, and this is important to note, because a lot of, and you listen to some khutbahs where they mention like Uthman radiallahu anhu being the gatherer of the Quran. Uthman, what happens, the history behind this is, during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whenever a verse was revealed, he would have the scribes write it down, and so he would recite it to them, they would listen, they would write it down, they would read it back to him, and they would recite it back to him, so that they not only wrote it down, they also memorized it as they were writing it. And in general, there were times when you only had maybe one or two scribes, but in general you'd have like several people sitting there. Okay. In the early Muslims, like among those who immigrated, you had roughly about 15 to 20 who knew how to read and write. And then later on, of course, that number grew. Everybody, or most people know that one of the things for things that could get a prisoner free after the Battle of Badr was teach 10 children how to read and write. That was one of the, like the captives, the ransom for the captives in Badr, the 70 that were captured from Quraysh. Those who knew how to read and write, if they could teach 10 Muslims to read and write, they would be freed. So you have, of course, so the number of people knowing how to read and write grows over time, so you have more and more people sitting and writing. So now, after, the other thing though is here, when you have the writings, you didn't have paper. Paper didn't exist at that time in Arabia. You had paper in China, but that knowledge isn't going to come into Arabia until, about 750, so we're talking about 100 years later or so. So the writing was done on leather, and gazelle leather, which really lasted a long time, or it was done on like the shoulder blades of camels, the bone, because it's flat, easy to write on, or on papaya, but papaya didn't last, so it wasn't preferred. It was done mainly on leather, and the one that we were talking about in the British archives that they recently pulled out is done on leather, and it's gazelle leather, which is known to last for hundreds of years. And so now, of course, so everything is written down, but it's not compiled together. So certain people have this writing, other people have another writing, so different writings. So during the time of Abu Bakr, you have the Ridda Wars, you have all these apostates. And then you have, at the end of that, you have the Battle of Yamama. So in the Battle of Yamama, 1,200 companions of Rasulullah were martyred. And you had 13,000 altogether who went to fight. Amongst those 1,200, 700 of them were Hufaz, they were Hafiz. Okay. So after this battle, Omar comes to Abu Bakr, and he says that, look, we need to write all of this down, because all these Hafiz all these battles that are coming, and people start being martyred, how are we going to protect the Quran? So Abu Bakr said that, how can I do what Rasulullah did not do? So some of the other companions also pushed the same issue, until Abu Bakr says that it dawned on him that this was the right thing to do. So he arranges a commission, which is led by Zayd bin Thabit, who is one of the scribes, and he's also one of the scholars of the Quran amongst the companions. And they have a committee that sits down, and they make a criteria. And the criteria is that they want everybody to bring in whatever writings they have. And the criteria for accepting a writing is that you have to have a writing, and you have to have two witnesses who were there when it was written down. So that later on, no one can say, oh no, they just put it together by themselves. And this is the reason that they're going through all of this hardship. Otherwise, Zayd bin Thabit is Hafiz, Ali was already there, he's Hafiz. There's so many other Hufaz that are there, they could just sat down and just written it out. Right? But then people say, they just made it up themselves. So he says, two witnesses and the writing. So people, start bringing stuff in, and it starts getting, compiled. And in some of the verses you have more than two witnesses. But there are 3 verses of the Quran where he only had one witness. And this is a miracle in itself, because of who that one witness was. These are the last 2 verses of Surah Tawbah, لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ. And then there's one other verse which I'm blanking on right now. But there are 3 verses. So the one who brought these verses was Khuzaymah radiallahu anhu. He brought them, And so Zayd says, where's your other witness? He says, I don't need another witness. He says, why don't you need another witness? He says, don't you know who I am? What happened was that during the time of Rasulullah Rasulullah made a deal with a person to buy a horse, a non-Muslim to buy a horse. They agreed on the price. Rasulullah said, let me go, or a camel, a horse or a camel, is an animal, horse or a camel. And they agreed on the price. Rasulullah said, let me go and get the money and I'll be back. Well, by the time he got back, someone else offered him more. And he had sold it. But Rasulullah said, we agreed. We had an agreement. Once the agreement's made, you don't have the choice of, So he says to Rasulullah, who's your witness? Khuzaymah, who happened to be going by, when this second discussion is taking place, he said, Ya Rasulullah, I am your witness. So Rasulullah said, how can you be a witness? You weren't there. He says, Ya Rasulullah, I believe, that revelation comes to you from up high. So I can't believe that you agreed on a price on this animal. So I am your witness. So Rasulullah said that the witnessing of Khuzaymah is the witnessing of two. So he's the only one who brought verses where there was no other, because all the other witnesses had been martyred. So this is a miracle in itself, that he's the only one for whom Rasulullah said that his witnessing is the witnessing of two. I mean, his level is nothing like the level of Abu Bakr or Umar, but their witnessing is only the witnessing of one. Yet for him, it's the witnessing of two. Right. So this is how they compiled the Quran. So then what happened, and this mushaf was initially kept with the daughter of Umar, the wife of Rasulullah, Bibi Hafsa. She's the one who kept this. And then during the time of Uthman, however, what happened was that, as we talked about before, all of these other writings were brought in, they were burnt, and then from this one original copy, you had 6 other copies that were made and then sent out. So this is where we get Uthman contribution. And this gets into what some other people say, but that's a different topic altogether.
Sahifa Uthman.
Hmm?
People say Sahifa Uthman.
Yes, yeah. So that's where they bring that in, which is not, it has no basis. Because if you say that, the people who say that, Sahifa Uthman, referring to the Quran, because they want to find some fault. Well, Ali was the Khalifa after him. So why didn't he fix it if there was an issue with it? Because there was no issue with it. And as we've mentioned before, he even affirmed what Uthman did by rebuking the other people, saying that if I had been there, I would have done the same thing. So we will end here, inshallah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and fill our hearts with His love and the love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and may He make us understand, and may He allow us to use this month to learn more about His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to love him more, and to understand and to practice what He wants us to do. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa